Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this special Q&A live stream to talk about the upcoming California Assembly Bill 413, otherwise known as daylighting. Welcome from the beautiful downtown Oxnard. We're here at the police station. I'm Paul Carganilla, the Community Affairs Manager for the Police Department. And while we are doing this virtually, we invite you to interact with us in the YouTube live chat. Drop in any questions you have at any time. We know this is kind of a very confusing topic, and it's difficult to wrap your brain around, but that's why we have some members of our traffic unit here to answer these questions, as it is New Year's Eve. Happy New Year, everyone. And this assembly bill does, of course, go into effect January 1st. So without any further ado, let's welcome to the live stream here our traffic unit sergeant, Mike Jens, and traffic unit officer, Pat Blanche. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening.
All right. So I think a lot of people who are here kind of have a gist of what it's all about, and we've been posting about it as much as we can throughout the year to get people prepared for this to go into effect here in January. But can you give us just a brief 1,000-foot rundown of what this new assembly bill is?
Sure. So AB 413, as it's called, or also known as daylighting, is essentially legislation created here in our state to help visibility at intersections, so we can see pedestrians, bicyclists, and even vehicles. This would prohibit vehicles on the approach to that intersection, or specifically the crosswalk, from parking along the right side of the road. So you would have better visibility to that sidewalk or corner. Whereas if you had vehicles out there parked, you would have limited visibility, just like as you see in the photo there on the screen. So that truck would be in violation there. If you remove that truck from that intersection or close to that intersection, you now have greater visibility for that pedestrian who had just stepped off the cross or sidewalk and into the crosswalk.
So the reason for this bill is basically there's been a real increase, or a heavy increase in California specifically, with fatal traffic collisions, and a lot of those happen to be pedestrians and bicyclists. And so the reason this bill was enacted was in order to assist in lowering those statistics when it comes to fatal traffic collisions.
Yeah, and I know we've done live streams about driving safer and how so many of our fatal traffic collisions here in Oxnard are rarely involving two vehicles. They're mostly vehicles versus against pedestrians or bicyclists. I was reading earlier that California now joins 43 other states that have similar laws.
Well, this is the first time I learned of that. Thanks, Paul, for the update.
Yes, of course.
But it makes sense. Like, we're going to be impacted because we're going to lose parking spots, obviously. But people often complain already before this law even took effect of their visibility when they're coming into intersections. So it's not, I mean, it's totally reasonable that the legislators got together and decided that they need to, create more visibility when you're approaching those intersections, just because it's hard to see anyway. And to your point that you brought up a moment ago, this year, all of our traffic fatalities have involved pedestrians and bicyclists. It wasn't two vehicles, crashing into each other, causing fatalities. It was all pedestrians and bicyclists that have been getting hit. So
every single one, 100%?
100% this year here in Oxnard.
Wow.
So this is kind of a unique year, but it just goes to show the dangers of being a pedestrian and bicyclists. So both sides have to work together. The pedestrians have to pay attention, have to cross where it's safe. Bicyclists need to, obey the rules of the road, and drivers have to be on the lookout for people as well.
And we have a few questions already coming in, and we invite anybody who's watching, please, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the live chat if they haven't been asked yet already. And also wanted to just let everyone know that while this is a live stream, as soon as it's over, it will be available to rewatch and share. So if you have friends or family that you think needs to hear the information that is here on the video, please go ahead and share that link wherever you can. I'm going to jump in with the first question because as I am I monitor all of our social media and manage, the messaging that goes out. And I read a lot of the questions that we do get. And one of the biggest ones that I want to clarify right off the bat is when people ask me, why is the city of Oxnard doing this to us? Don't they know that we have heavily impacted areas? We're heavily populated in certain parts of the city, and there's just no room for all these vehicles. Why would the city do this to us?
So the it's not necessarily the city. It's basically a California bill that's been passed. And so we, as the city of Oxnard, we always follow all the rules based on like what we have regulations for as enforcing laws, as well as a lot of various other things. And so it's not necessarily the city of Oxnard that's enforcing this or trying to impact or make living conditions uncomfortable based on the amount of parking. It's basically we're trying to fall under the laws that are enacted in order to make sure that everyone is safe. Yeah, and I get it. I mean, a lot of people will be impacted based on like traffic, and we've been doing as much as we can in order to assist in that, and as like giving people warnings on like what is to come, as well as there are some areas where they have people who save spots with cones and stuff, and we go out there and try to deal with that in order to make sure that people have enough space in order to park so it doesn't impact them as bad.
Yeah, then that's the big eye opener, I think, for a lot of people is it's not the city of Oxnard. This is a California thing. And it is interesting to hear that California is kind of behind the eight ball on something like this, considering 43 other states already have something like it in place. I'm going to jump into one of the questions in the live chat from Kernals. He asks, crosswalks, this is a very common one. Crosswalks are obvious because they're painted. What is considered to be a crosswalk, marked, unmarked, as it says in the Assembly Bill, marked or unmarked crosswalk? What is that considered to be?
Hey, so Paul, pull up your photo you presented a moment ago. Essentially, every intersection you come up to has a crosswalk, or just about every intersection. So you look right here. This is a four-way intersection controlled by a stop sign for north and south. So the other way does not have a stop sign or yield sign or any other traffic control device. All entries into that intersection have a crosswalk. Obviously, they're not painted here on this one, but any and all cross or intersections here in California, whether marked or not, will have a crosswalk. That also includes T intersections and different types of intersections, not just four ways. But so imagine a crosswalk right where that officer is crossing the street. Whether it's painted or not, there will always be a crosswalk for a pedestrian, and you have to yield to that pedestrian. He's not in a crosswalk, but he's in an unmarked crosswalk. So you would have to yield to him. So if you pulled out in front of him right there, you would be in a traffic violation 21,950, and you could potentially get a citation for that. So every intersection just like that would have a crosswalk, whether it's painted or not.
So just to clarify, because I do a lot of walking here in the neighborhood around the police station, and this photo was actually taken there. Sometimes it's a four-way stop, sometimes it's not. Is it only a crosswalk if there is a stop sign in that direction?
No. As long as it's an
always
intersection, you have to create that environment for a pedestrian to safely cross. So again, there's endless amounts of intersections here in Oxnard that do not have a painted crosswalk. I can assure you that those situations would be the same. There would be a crosswalk.
Speaking of paint, that segues perfectly to our next question from Delphina. She or he asks, are the sidewalks going to be marked or painted so it's easier to know how far from the corner to park?
So unfortunately, they're not going to be all marked. The city of Oxnard, as well as probably the other 43 different states that are falling in line with this particular type of enforcement and informational outlook, is there's not a lot of resources in order to do that within the city to make it to where people can know how the area which they can park. And so what we've been giving is basically a rule of thumb, which is about 1.5 car lengths away from the actual intersection. So if you just, and the thing is we're not going to go out and and like take a measuring tape and like be nitpicky to try to increase some sort of revenue or to be those types of people. But our main goal is to just basically enable a safe environment for pedestrians and bicyclists. And so that being said, as long as you're a car and a half length back, we're not going to just start hunting for people that are, you know, not parked in the appropriate area. It's basically 20 feet and, you know, give or take a couple feet, but just to allow the ability to have visible interaction with traffic as well as people in traffic.
Yeah, it says in the chat, some of our participants, Freddie and DJ, are saying they've already received warning tickets. So the words, we have been trying to spread the word, but those are just warnings. They're not citations yet, correct? And we will continue to, we start official enforcement on January 1st, but will those be more warnings or tickets for a certain amount of, or warnings for a certain amount of time, or citations right away?
We're probably gonna do a combination. Like Officer Blanche says, we're not gonna go out and take a measuring tape. If you're close, we'll probably give you a warning, just to let you know, hey, we want to educate you as much as anything else. So yeah, it's probably gonna be a combination. But yeah, we've already issued some 2,000 warnings. We sent flyers out. We've done videos. We've got on Spanish language radio stations. We've done just about all we can possibly do to spread the message. To kind of go off of the earlier question about red curbs and signs, clearly the legislators thought about this before passing this bill or introducing it. They put language in there specifically stating that it's not a requirement. So they must have thought about this ahead of time and the impact or the requirements it would cause local agencies to paint all these curbs and put up signs everywhere. And they most likely felt that that was not sufficient. So no, there will be no red curbs or signs. Maybe in some locations there will be, and in some locations there are already red curbs. So some intersections will already have those, but no, the city of Oxnard does not plan to make that or start that anytime soon.
Logistically, when you consider the amount of curbs that would need to be painted, the amount of paint that would be needed, the amount of manpower and hours to pay employees to paint all of the curbs. So I think somebody mentioned once before in the past that just like this is a law that should, or a bill that will should become so widespread and so widely known that you don't have to see a red painted curb to know you can't park within 20 feet. One of the stipulations is that I want to clarify too is the 15-footer. If there's a curb extension, I had a question about this the first time I heard that language. I'm sorry, I don't have a picture of one readily available. Can you describe what a curb extension is and where in Oxnard those exist, if they do?
Yeah, so right offhand, there's a couple curb extensions coming onto J Street from side residentials. Basically, the cement curb is raised and it curves out a couple of feet into the roadway and provides for like a access ramp to get onto the sidewalk. So once you see a curb extension, I mean, you can't miss it if you see it again. Basically, when you come up to that intersection, the sidewalk curb will actually kind of flare out a little bit, a foot or two, and there usually is kind of a ramp to get onto the sidewalk at that point. So on those locations, yeah, it's 15 feet, so it'll be a little shorter.
Gotcha. All right, we'll dive into a couple more questions here. Dickie Burbank asks, is the parking going to be enforced at night and early morning? She says the crosswalks in a 3-block radius of Rio del Norte on Lobelia are blocked all the time.
So yeah, so essentially they're going to be enforced at all times. More predominantly more in the daytime when there's obviously a lot more resources out there and able to see and deal with that. But for the most part, a lot of our serious injury collisions happen at nighttime, and that can be basically dealt with a little bit easier or better without those vehicles blocking. So It basically depends on the resources we have at the time, and like on a busy Friday night, not a lot of officers are gonna that's not gonna take the priority of like what they're trying to do, as well as like help different emergencies and things that are going on. But there's not going to be a specific time period where we're actually enforcing the at a heavier time than a lighter time. It's going to be based on, and there's going to be people that are going to call in, and they're going to just be upset because maybe they received a warning or ticket, or maybe they are just someone who cares for the public and wants to make sure that it's safe for everyone. And so we may or may not be tasked with going out and told to go in an area to specifically address some of these scenarios. But the main thing is that if it's there and it's obvious, it's probably going to be enforced. So, and we obviously, if we have the time and the resources to do it.
There's a couple questions, and I think it has to do with the confusing and ambiguous language about the whole. At the top of the assembly bill here, it says vehicles stopping, standing, and parking. So I think that has to do with these questions they're asking. The wording seems very ambiguous. Do we have the option to move forward if we can't see traffic in the intersection? I don't want to accelerate, hoping to merge into a lane. And how does the public protect themselves to avoid getting pulled over daily? I think that has to do with the stopping, the whole stopping part of that language, but there's a difference between the parking and the stopping 20 feet away from the intersection, correct?
Yeah, and I think it's more based on the perception of maybe the question. So if you're trying to enter into an intersection, it's reasonable to basically yield, or to make sure that it's clear to get close enough to exit into the roadway. But the main thing is that if you are you're not able to see, and you start to go up, it's okay to like slow down and stop in order to make sure it's safe to enter the roadway. I believe one of the elements of that language is basically people who are doing that to the farthest right, where they shouldn't be stopped or stationary, where they're actually blocking the actual traffic for an extended amount of time. People coming up to the farthest right side of the roadway, which the California Vehicle Code actually says, where you should make a turn. Just because you're slowing in that particular area to make sure you're clear to enter the traffic, you're not going to be cited for that. You're not going to be cited for making sure that everything's safe. Our main our main culprit of or the person that would receive one of these warnings and or citations is the vehicles that are left unoccupied and clearly blocking for no emergency reason, or to allow people to have visibility for oncoming pedestrians or bicyclists.
And as you mentioned, you're not going to have the measuring tape out there as far as people parking in front of their own homes. There's a lot of questions about that happening in the chat. Freddie says, we live on the corner of Hemlock and Anonymous Street. My car back wheels touch the corner of our driveway, meaning my car is far enough from blocking any pedestrian from not being able to see what's coming. And he already got a warning, he says. And DJ says if there are 1,657 streets in Oxnard, multiple that by 40 feet, there's only a certain number of miles of parking being taken away from motorists. Where do you expect us to park? A lot of people are frustrated. As we mentioned, parking is already at a commodity here in Oxnard, and this is going to pose a lot of challenges for people. And when you get those kind of questions, what kind of advice can you give?
Yeah, we're just gonna have to work together on this one. It was handed to us. We didn't go out looking for this. So we're just gonna have to do our best to work together. Again, if you're in a spot where you're, a foot or two, and which would be in considered a violation, we're gonna maybe write you a warning, and maybe not, maybe talk to you. But we're not going to write you a citation if you're that close, or if it's too close. We're gonna go for the egregious violations. That's really all the resources we have to be able to enforce this. For those who have gotten warnings already, know that we were trying to get the word out too. So if you were even close, we were going to write you a warning. That way you just knew that, hey, maybe you didn't even hear this law before, and now you got this warning ticket. Looks something like this. You got this on your windshield, and now you know exactly what the law is for, and you can tell your friends or your neighbors, hey, this is what I got. You can't park like that. And again, we wrote as many as we could. So if you were even close to the violation, you were probably going to get this warning, and that was just to spread the word.
And one of the things that you have to consider is and I live in a neighborhood where it's pretty congested as well. And there's certain days where I probably walk about a block to get to my house. And I live in a pretty decent area, but I don't mind it because I understand the value of it. And maybe it's because of where I work, but if I were just a regular person and not necessarily my family or anyone's family were to come to like a serious injury collision, if a child was riding their bike and got a little ahead of their parents and rode into the intersection and got seriously injured, if I can help that, then that's what I would rather do. I'd rather park farther enough away in order to allow somebody the chance and the ability to have a fruitful life. And it does stink because, you know, parking a block away and then, you know, having to do groceries and stuff, it's like, you know, but in the grand scheme of things, that's a little bit of energy versus a lifetime of like suffering or worrying for someone else's family. So that's the way I look at it.
That's what I've heard a lot on social media is people saying, look, this makes a lot of sense and it's gonna make things safer for bicyclists and pedestrians. But it's just so frustrating that it's really difficult to find parking in a lot of neighborhoods here in Oxnard. And like we've been saying, like Sergeant Jens just said, it's not something we went out and looked for. This was handed to us, and we have to do our best to fall within the guidelines of the state of California and work with our community to make it safer for bicyclists and pedestrians. Um, there was an earlier question about the fatal collisions that we've had so far this year, and as far as like where they were in the city, if they were in residential areas or on main streets. Do you see more in certain places?
More of our arterial roadways are major thoroughfares, but there have been a couple in the residentials too. It's just oh, go ahead.
Oh no. And actually we had one several weeks ago where this particular bill may or may not have assisted in preventing that particular fatality. So that was the first thing I actually thought when because as traffic officers, we do respond to those to make sure that we investigate it in the fullest extent. And just on brief observation, this particular bill, I would have played a huge factor in the ability of for maybe the driver to be able to see, I believe. So
Yeah, DJ voicing more frustration about, he says there are only 3 homes that have driveways on my street. We work hard to live with each other and give the respect for homeowners in front of their own home. This is just going to restart parking wars. Very frustrating. We totally understand. And Kernels is asking, so just to clarify, just so it's crystal clear for everybody out there, is this statement accurate? To avoid tickets, do not park on any street corner.
Not necessarily. It's the vehicle approach side. So if you're approaching an intersection, you cannot park on the right side of your approach. So the opposite side, you can park. Our goal is to try to get people away from the corners completely, but we cannot legally cite you on the opposite side. So it has to be the vehicle approach side to that intersection or that crosswalk.
and based on that that language and the way it's written, it's because as an approaching vehicle comes up to the intersection, the driver has a better visibility angle when it comes to the left side versus the right side. On the right side of a vehicle, you have things such as the A pillar, their A, B, and C pillar in the way, as well as a lot of pedestrians are basically taught to walk the opposite direction of the roadway and the travel. And so by wording it that way, it makes it to where the pedestrians that are expectant to have like a level of safety walking in the direction they walk, it gives them more of the benefit in order to be in that safe area. So that angle is what we're basically trying to enforce, is so someone can see as they're approaching, when they look to their right, they have more of a clearance and a more of a visual field of view in order to safely enter that intersection to cross without hitting a pedestrian or bicyclist. And so and then if bicyclists are riding on the sidewalk or the wrong way, they actually have a little bit more time to stop and or avoid a collision. With someone coming or approaching from the left side, they would actually almost have to be into the complete street in order to be hit. And so there's a lot more cushion and time value associated with the safety of people on the opposite side or the non-approach side of a intersection.
We have a lot of very specific questions coming in. So if somebody has specific to their neighborhood or their own homes, they want to send in pictures and ask you questions, what's the best way to contact you?
Probably email. I believe mine's on our website, but michael.gens, gens, at oxnardpd.org. I'm the traffic sergeant, so I can answer your question or help find an answer to your question.
A couple other ones. I know we're up against the time here. It's just about 6:30, but Carlos asks, if a car accident occurs at an intersection involving a vehicle and a pedestrian, and a vehicle is found to be parked on the curb close to the corner, will that vehicle be cited regardless of the driver's fault?
Ooh, 100% if I'm there.
Yeah, and if it for whatever reason had to play a factor in this whole thing, as well as a level of transparency as us doing our job as enforcement, that vehicle is most likely going to get a citation. So it's just to make sure that we're doing our best, and it's like if we see a crime happen in front of us, we're not going to let it go. We have to enforce the crime. And so if it has to do with something we're investigating, especially a serious injury collision, and that vehicle is in violation, we have to be transparent. We have to do what we need to do.
And I'm not sure if we have yet, and if we haven't, if there is some, let me know, available for us to share, and we'll share it on social media. But one question is, do we have any images or a video of the correct way to park your cars in the intersection?
So there, we don't have any videos per se. We do have that image that you had posted prior, but that image is basically what not to do. But if you search up AB 413, there's probably you'll get about 100 different images of what it looks like and what it's designed to do, or what kind of clear perspective and like visual plane that it's trying to exemplify, so people can understand what it is that they're expecting. So it'll even have like a measurement, like the amount of distance from the actual hard or hard angle of the actual intersection, and the distance of the car back from the actual four-way stop or intersection that it's trying to describe at the time.
We'll sneak one more in here before we hit the end of the clock, but this is a quick one that we get fairly often, and it doesn't even have to do with this assembly bill, but I've seen people reserving parking spots with cones or chairs. Is that legal? Because I've seen officers driving by and not do anything.
No, it's not legal. You can't leave cones, chairs, even your trash cans in the street. Actually, you can be cited if you leave your trash can in the street for an extended period of time. There's a city ordinance code that prohibits that. For the cones and the chairs, it's not something we can do often, but if an officer is asked to take enforcement action, I guess he or she can pick up that cone and get rid of it, because it's just like anything else. You wouldn't leave anything else in the middle of the street. So I guess that's what action could be taken if necessary.
And so the understanding of some people don't realize is that the street is public, and so a lot of people who have residences where those things are parked and reserved, for some reason there's a misunderstanding of like that being their property, and that typically is not their property. And the issue is with the people who are doing that, and then the worry of the people who are trying to park there. Like if for whatever reason that item gets moved and then the vehicle's there, they worry that something will happen to their vehicle. The main thing is that we like every couple weeks or a week or so, we will actually take a truck out and we'll go down the street by street and pull those cones off in order to and make ourselves known that we're removing these items in order for people to have the ability to park. It doesn't happen often, but we do our best, and most likely we'll have to start making a constant effort to make those streets clear for everyone to park, and make the public understand that it's not part of their property. It's actually public property. So it's not legal for people to do that, and if people are doing that, and for whatever reason a vehicle needs to park and that stuff gets moved. You just have to understand that that's part of where you live in the city of Oxnard, and you have to understand that there's a lot of people who work really hard for what they do and what they drive, and they need to have a place to put it without getting a ticket.
Thank you so much for everybody who has tuned in. There's been a lot of questions. Hopefully we answered some. And if you have any, again, specific questions, Sergeant Jens invited you to email him. I dropped his email address in the live chat stream. It's michael.jens, Jens, at oxnardpd.org. If you have those specific questions, you want to send him pictures and make sure you have your clarification, please hit him up there. And again, as I mentioned at the top, hopefully this is a nice 30-minute bite-sized version of a Q&A that you can share with family and friends who have any other questions as well. And we understand that it is a frustrating new assembly bill, especially in this town. And there's questions about if are other cities enforcing it. And we haven't monitored that as far as I know. And again, it goes into effect January 1st. But regardless of other cities, it is a mandate from the state of California. It is a bill from our legislation. So we will do our best to abide and work together, as we mentioned a couple of times throughout this, respectfully work together and try and, enact this bill as comfortably and as peacefully as we can. And we understand the frustrations, and it does, like people say, it is going to help have more of an impact on the safety of our pedestrians and bicyclists. And we're all in this together. And we thank you, everybody out there in the city of Oxnard, and maybe even outside the city, who are watching and learning along with us. And again, feel free to share the link. Thank you to our officers, Officer Blanche and Sergeant Jens, for joining us and answering these questions this evening. And again, we wish everybody a happy new year. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.